The woman stumbled into Independence, California on a Tuesday morning in July of 1878, leading 3 mules loaded so heavily their legs trembled, a wagon with a broken wheel dragging behind the last animal, and carrying a rifle across her back that looked like it weighed more than most men could comfortably hold. Olivia Owens had been walking for 18 miles since dawn, and the sun beat down on her like a hammer striking an anvil, but she did not slow her pace or show weakness in her stride. She wore a man's shirt tucked into canvas trousers, her auburn hair tied back in a severe braid that fell to her waist, and her green eyes scanned the dusty Main Street with the calculating gaze of someone who had learned young that survival meant carrying your own weight, and then some. Independence sat in the Owens Valley with the Sierra Nevada rising like a wall to the west, and in summer the heat could cook a person straight through. The town had grown up around mining and ranching, a rough collection of wooden buildings and tents that served the men who worked the nearby silver claims and the cattle operations that spread across the valley floor. Olivia had never been here before, but desperation had a way of pointing you toward unfamiliar places. Her father had died 3 months ago, leaving her with debts she had not known existed, 2 younger brothers who needed feeding, and a determination that ran deeper than any mine shaft that she would not lose the freight business he had built. She led her mules to the livery stable, her boots kicking up dust with each step. The animals needed water and rest, and the wagon wheel needed fixing before she could make the delivery to the general store. The freight contract was small, just dry goods and tools from Bishop, but it was hers, and she intended to fulfill it even if her shoulders ached and her feet had blisters that bled into her socks. The livery was run by an older man with a gray beard who looked at her cargo with raised eyebrows. "That is a hell of a load for one person," he said, spitting tobacco juice into the dirt. "It is my load," Olivia replied. "I need the wagon wheel repaired and the mules watered." "How much?" He named a price that was fair, and she paid him half upfront, promising the rest when the work was done. She unloaded the mules herself, carrying crates and sacks that made the stable owner shake his head, though whether in admiration or disapproval she could not tell and did not care. Her father had taught her that people would always have opinions about what a woman should and should not do, and that the only opinion that mattered was your own when you looked in the mirror at night. When she finished unloading, she walked to the general store to speak with the proprietor about her delivery. The store was dim and cool inside, smelling of coffee and leather, and the particular dusty scent of a place that sold everything from needles to saddles. A man stood behind the counter, middle-aged and balding, and he looked up from his ledger when she entered. "I am Olivia Owens," she said. "I have your freight from Bishop." "You are Owens," he frowned. "I expected Samuel Owens. My father died in April. I run the business now." The proprietor's expression shifted between surprise and doubt. "You carried that load yourself?" "I did." "Well," he cleared his throat. "The goods are at the livery. I will send my boy to fetch them when the wagon is repaired. Payment on delivery as agreed." She nodded and turned to leave, but stopped when she heard voices rising outside. Through the store's front window, she could see a crowd gathering in the street, and she recognized the angry tone that meant trouble. Her hand moved instinctively to the knife she kept at her belt, though she hoped she would not need it. Outside, a group of men had surrounded someone, their voices sharp with hostility. Olivia pushed through the crowd, her height allowing her to see over some of the shorter onlookers. In the center of the circle stood a cowboy, young and dusty from the trail, his hands raised in a placating gesture. He wore typical range clothes, denim trousers and a faded blue shirt, a bandana around his neck, and a hat that had seen better days. His face was lean and tanned, with dark hair visible beneath the hat brim and eyes that were a startling shade of blue even in the harsh sunlight. "I am telling you, I do not know anything about stolen cattle," the cowboy was saying, his voice steady despite the hostility surrounding him. "I just rode in looking for work." "You match the description," one of the men growled. He was thick-shouldered and red-faced with a deputy's badge pinned to his vest. Dark hair, blue eyes, riding a bay horse heading south through the valley. "That describes half the cowboys in California," the young man replied. "I have been riding from Carson City, and I have not seen any cattle except the ones grazing legally on their own land." The deputy was not convinced, and his hand moved toward the gun at his hip. The crowd pressed closer, and Olivia felt the situation tipping toward violence. She had seen this before, the way men in groups could turn ugly fast, especially in places where law was thin and justice often came from a rope rather than a courtroom. "He was at Miller's ranch last week," Olivia heard herself say, her voice cutting through the tension. The men turned to look at her, surprise on their faces. "I saw him there when I was making a delivery. He was working in the stables." "Could not have been him who took your cattle if he was 20 miles north at the time." It was a lie, smooth and confident, and she was not entirely sure why she told it. Perhaps because she recognized the look in the cowboy's eyes, the trapped desperation of someone who had done nothing wrong but knew that innocence would not save him if the crowd decided otherwise. Perhaps because she had spent her whole life watching people judge her based on assumptions rather than facts, and she was tired of it. The deputy scowled. "You sure about that?" "I am certain," Olivia said, meeting his gaze without flinching. "I remember because he helped me load some heavy crates. I do not forget a kindness." The cowboy's eyes met hers for a brief moment, and she saw gratitude there, but also confusion. He was smart enough not to contradict her, though, and he nodded. "That is right. Miller can confirm it if you wire him." The deputy looked between them, clearly wanting to push the matter but unable to do so in the face of a witness statement. "If I find out you are lying," he said to Olivia, "you will answer for it." "You will not," she said calmly, "because I am not." The crowd began to disperse, the entertainment over, and the deputy stalked away muttering under his breath. The cowboy stood alone in the street, and after a moment he walked over to where Olivia waited near the general store. "Thank you," he said quietly. "That could have gone bad." "It still might if they catch up with whoever actually stole those cattle and he looks nothing like you." He smiled, and it transformed his face, making him seem younger than she had first thought. Early 20s, she guessed, maybe a year or two older than her own 21 years. "I will take my chances, at least I will be alive to face them. I am Reed Finch, Olivia Owens." "Why did you lie for me?" She considered the question. "Because they were wrong and I do not like mobs. Where are you really from?" "Carson City, like I said." "I have been working ranches up north, but the winter was hard and work dried up. I heard there might be opportunities down in the valley." He paused. "I really am looking for work if you know of anything." Olivia thought about her two brothers back in Bishop, the freight contracts she needed to fulfill, the loads that were getting heavier and the distances that seemed to grow longer each time she set out. She thought about the way her back ached at night and how her hands were developing calluses on top of calluses. She thought about the fact that she had just saved this man's life, which meant she bore some responsibility for what he did with it. "I might have something," she said. "It does not pay much, but it is honest work. I run a freight business and I could use someone who can handle mules and heavy loads." Reed looked at her, really looked, and she saw him taking in her travel-worn clothes, the strength in her frame, the directness in her gaze. "You run a freight business, my father did. I do now. Are you interested or not?" I am interested. When do I start? Tomorrow at dawn. We leave for Bishop to pick up another load, then back here for delivery, then south to Lone Pine. It is hard work, and like I said, the pay is not much. I am not afraid of hard work. He extended his hand and she shook it. His grip was firm and calloused, the hand of someone who had spent his life doing physical labor. You will not regret this. I better not, Olivia said. Because if you make me regret lying to a deputy for you, I will make sure you regret it more, he laughed, and the sound was genuine. Fair enough. She gave him directions to where he could stable his horse and where to meet her in the morning, then walked back to the livery to check on her mules. The stable owner had made good progress on the wagon wheel, and her animals were resting in the shade, their sides no longer heaving with exertion. She paid the remainder of what she owed and made arrangements to leave the wagon overnight, then found a boarding house where she could rent a bed for a few hours. That night, lying on a thin mattress in a room she shared with two other women, Olivia wondered if she had made a mistake. She knew nothing about Reed Finch except that he had an honest face and had been about to be strung up for something he claimed he did not do. Men lied all the time, and she had no reason to trust him. But something in his eyes had convinced her, that trapped look that she recognized from her own reflection in those first weeks after her father died, when creditors came calling and neighbors offered sympathy but no real help. She had learned then that strength was not just about how much weight you could carry, but about how long you could keep carrying it when everyone expected you to collapse. She had learned that being a woman in a man's business meant working twice as hard for half the respect. And she had learned that sometimes you had to take chances, because playing it safe was just another way of giving up. The next morning she met Reed at the livery just as the sun was breaking over the mountains. He was already there, his horse saddled and his bedroll tied behind the saddle, looking ready to work. She loaded the wagon with her empty crates and hitched the mules, and he helped without being asked, his movements efficient and practiced. They set out north toward Bishop as the valley began to heat up, the road dusty and rutted from the summer drought. They did not talk much at first. Olivia was naturally quiet, and Reed seemed content to ride alongside the wagon without forcing conversation. But as the miles passed and the sun climbed higher, he began to ask questions. Where had she learned to handle mules? How long had her father run the freight business? What were the routes like? She answered briefly at first, but found herself warming to the subject. Her father had started the business 15 years ago, hauling supplies to mining camps and remote ranches throughout the Owens Valley. He had taught her everything, from how to pack a load so it balanced properly to which merchants were honest and which would try to cheat you. She had been helping him since she was 12, and by the time she was 16 she could manage a team as well as any man. What happened to him? Reed asked. If you don't mind me asking. His heart gave out. He was loading a wagon and just collapsed. The doctor said it was quick. She kept her eyes on the road ahead. He left debts I did not know about, gambling debts mostly. I have been working to pay them off while keeping the business running and taking care of my brothers. How old are your brothers? 15 and 12. Old enough to be helpful, young enough to still need raising. Reed nodded. That is a lot to carry. It is what it is. They stopped at midday to rest the mules and eat the dried beef and hard bread Olivia had packed. The heat was oppressive, shimmering off the valley floor in waves that made the distant mountains look like they were melting. Reed pulled his hat low and leaned against a wagon wheel, and Olivia sat in the small patch of shade the wagon provided. Why did you really help me yesterday? Reed asked. I told you, I do not like mobs. There is more to it than that. Olivia was quiet for a moment, chewing her bread. I spent my whole life watching people make assumptions about what I could or could not do based on what I looked like. Man sees a woman and thinks she is weak, or thinks she needs protecting, or thinks she should be doing something other than hauling freight. Gets tiresome. I figured maybe you knew what that felt like, everyone deciding they knew your story before you even opened your mouth. I do, Reed said quietly. My father was a drunk who ran off when I was 10. After that, people in our town decided I would turn out the same way. Didn't matter what I did or how hard I worked, they had already written my story, so I left and started over somewhere people didn't know me. Did it help? Some. But you can't outrun everything, he looked at her. You are different, though. You are not trying to be someone else. You are just being who you are and daring people to have a problem with it. They have problems with it. But you do it anyway. That takes courage. Olivia felt heat rise to her face that had nothing to do with the sun. She was not accustomed to compliments, especially from men. Most men either dismissed her or saw her as a challenge, something to be conquered or put in its proper place. Reed spoke like he saw her as a person, not a category. They reached Bishop by late afternoon, and Olivia went straight to the warehouse where her next load waited. It was a delivery of mining equipment bound for a claim near Independence, heavy picks and pans and coils of rope. Reed helped her load the wagon, and she was impressed by how much he could carry. He was lean but strong, the kind of wiry strength that came from years of ranch work. Her brothers were waiting at the small house she rented on the edge of town. Oscar was the older one, tall and gangly with their father's dark coloring, while Otis was smaller and lighter, taking after their mother who had died when he was born. They looked at Reed with open curiosity when Olivia introduced him as her new helper. "Are you fast with a gun?" Otis asked, his eyes bright with the excitement of a boy who had grown up on stories of outlaws and shootouts. "Fast enough to stay alive," Reed said, "but I prefer not to draw it if I can avoid it." "That is a boring answer," Otis said, disappointed. "Boring keeps you breathing," Reed replied. "Exciting gets you buried." Oscar was more reserved, studying Reed with the careful assessment of someone who had been forced to grow up quickly. "How long are you planning to work for my sister?" "As long as she will have me," Reed said. "I gave her my word I would pull my weight, and I keep my word." Oscar nodded slowly, seeming satisfied. Olivia felt a rush of affection for both her brothers, these boys who had become her responsibility and her reason for pushing forward when everything felt impossible. That evening they ate together. A simple meal of beans and cornbread that Olivia prepared while the boys peppered Reed with questions about where he had been and what he had seen. Reed answered patiently, telling stories about cattle drives and harsh winters and the time he had seen a grizzly bear take down an elk. He made the stories exciting without making them frightening, and Olivia appreciated his instinct for what her brothers needed. After dinner, Oscar and Otis went to bed in the small room they shared, and Olivia showed Reed where he could sleep in the lean-to attached to the house. It was not much, just a canvas roof and 3 walls, but it was dry and out of the wind. "Thank you," Reed said, "for the work and for trusting me around your family." "Do not make me regret it," Olivia said, though her tone was gentler than the words suggested. "I will not." She went inside and lay down on her own bed, listening to the night sounds of the town. For the first time in months, she felt like maybe the weight she carried was not quite so crushing. Having someone to share the load, even just the physical burden of hauling freight, made everything feel more manageable. She told herself not to get too comfortable, not to rely on someone who could leave as easily as he had arrived. But as she drifted toward sleep, she allowed herself to hope that maybe this time, someone would stay. They left before dawn the next morning, the wagon heavily loaded and the mules fresh from a night's rest. The journey back to Independence took most of the day, and they fell into an easy rhythm, taking turns walking alongside the wagon to spare the animals. Reed proved himself capable and reliable, anticipating what needed to be done without being told, adjusting loads when they shifted, checking the harnesses for wear. They talked more as the miles passed. Reed told her about growing up in Nevada, about learning to work cattle and break horses, about the satisfaction of honest labor and the frustration of watching other men get opportunities denied to him because of his father's reputation. Olivia told him about her father's dream of expanding the freight business, about the routes he had planned to establish before his death, about her own determination to not just survive but to build something lasting. "You could do it," Reed said. "Expand, I mean. You are good at this, and there is plenty of demand for reliable freight in the valley." "It takes money," Olivia said. "Money I do not have because I am still paying off debts. How much longer until the debts are cleared? Another year, maybe 2 if things stay steady. And after that? After that, we will see." She did not want to let herself dream too far ahead, not when so much could still go wrong. They delivered the mining equipment to a claim in the hills east of Independence, and the miners paid in silver coin that Olivia carefully counted and recorded in her ledger. The claim was a rough operation, just 3 men working a shaft that descended into the mountainside, hoping to strike it rich. They looked at Olivia with surprise when she climbed down from the wagon, clearly not expecting a woman, but they paid without argument and even helped unload the heavier equipment. The sun was setting by the time they returned to Independence, painting the Sierra Nevada in shades of gold and crimson. Olivia felt the bone-deep exhaustion of a long day's work, but it was a good exhaustion, the kind that came from accomplishment rather than futility. Reed seemed tired too, but he still helped her stable the mules and secure the wagon before seeking his own rest. Over the following weeks, they fell into a pattern. They would take contracts throughout the valley, hauling everything from food supplies to furniture to mining equipment. Reed proved himself indispensable, not just for his strength, but for his steady presence and his willingness to do whatever needed doing. He never complained about early mornings or long days, or the back-breaking work of loading and unloading cargo. He never questioned Olivia's decisions or tried to take over, seeming content to follow her lead while offering suggestions when asked. Olivia found herself looking forward to their days on the road, to the conversations they had while the wagon rolled along dusty trails. Reed was easy to talk to, genuinely interested in her thoughts and opinions. He asked about her dreams for the business, about what she wanted for her brother's futures, about the things she had sacrificed to keep her family together. And he listened, really listened, not just waiting for his turn to talk. She learned that Reed had dreams too, though he spoke of them carefully, as if afraid to voice them too loudly. He wanted land of his own someday, a small ranch where he could raise horses. Not a big operation, just something that was his, something no one could take away because of his name or his past. He wanted to build something that lasted, same as she did. One afternoon in late August, they were hauling supplies to Lone Pine when a wheel hit a hidden rock and the wagon lurched violently. One of the crates shifted and would have fallen on Olivia if Reed had not lunged forward and caught it, taking the full weight on his shoulder. He grunted with the impact but held firm until they could secure the load properly. "Are you hurt?" Olivia asked, seeing him wince as he rotated his shoulder. "Just bruised, I will be fine." "You did not have to do that. The crate would have missed me. Maybe. But I was not going to take that chance." She looked at him, this cowboy who had become something more than just hired help over the past weeks. Something had shifted between them, a connection deeper than employer and employee. She saw it in the way he watched out for her, not because he thought she was weak, but because he cared what happened to her. She felt it in the way her heart lifted when she saw him each morning, in the way she found herself wanting to share not just her days but her thoughts with him. "Reed," she said quietly, "thank you for everything, not just today." "You gave me a chance when no one else would," he replied. "I am the one who should be thanking you." They continued on to Lone Pine, but something had changed, an unspoken acknowledgement hanging in the air between them. Olivia had not let herself think about romance, not with everything else she had to worry about. But now she found her thoughts drifting in that direction, wondering what it would be like to build a life with someone, to share not just the burdens but the joys. That evening, after they made their delivery and were eating dinner at a small restaurant in Lone Pine, Reed said, "Can I ask you something personal?" "You can ask. I might not answer," he smiled. "Fair enough. Have you ever thought about doing something other than freight? Not giving it up, but expanding in a different direction?" "Like what?" "Like passenger service. There are plenty of people who need to get from one town to another, and the stage lines do not always run where they need to go. You have the wagons and the know-how. It would be another source of income." Olivia considered this. "It is an interesting idea, but passenger service requires different equipment and it would mean more risk. You are responsible for people, not just cargo." "True. But you are good with people. And having another income stream would help you clear those debts faster." She studied him across the table. "Why do you care so much about my business?" Reed was quiet for a moment, his blue eyes serious. "Because I care about you, not just the business but you. I know I am just hired help, and I know you have enough to deal with without some cowboy complicating things. But I wanted you to know." Olivia's breath caught. She had known, on some level, that something was growing between them. But hearing him say it out loud made it real in a way that both thrilled and frightened her. "Reed, I do not know what to say." "You do not have to say anything. I just wanted you to know where I stand. I will keep working for you either way, and I will respect whatever boundaries you want to set. But I would be lying if I said I did not hope for more." She reached across the table and took his hand. His fingers closed around hers, warm and strong. "I care about you too," she said softly. "I have been trying not to because I do not have room in my life for complications. But you are not a complication. You are the first good thing that has happened to me in a very long time." "Then maybe we should see where this goes," Reed said, his thumb brushing across her knuckles. "No promises, no pressure. Just two people who enjoy each other's company, seeing if it might become something more." "I would like that," Olivia said, and meant it. They returned to Bishop the next day, and Olivia felt like the world had brightened somehow, colors more vivid and possibilities more real. Her brothers noticed the change immediately, Oscar giving her knowing looks and Otis asking if Reed was going to be their brother now. She told them to mind their own business, but she could not quite suppress her smile. Over the following months, Reed became part of the family in ways that went beyond his work. He taught Oscar how to properly care for tack and showed Otis how to read trail signs. He sat with them in the evenings, telling stories or playing cards or just talking about their days. He fixed things around the house that had been broken for months, not because Olivia could not fix them herself, but because he wanted to help. And with Olivia, he was patient and genuine, never pushing for more than she was ready to give. They stole moments when they could, conversations under the stars after long days on the road, hands brushing as they worked side by side, quick kisses when no one was watching. It was not dramatic or overwhelming, but it was real, and Olivia found herself falling in love with a steadiness she had never known before. The freight business grew. Word spread that Olivia Owens was reliable and honest, and new contracts came in. She hired another helper, a young man named Daniel, who reminded her of Reed in his earnestness and work ethic. With 3 people working, they could take on larger loads and more ambitious routes. The money improved, and Olivia began to see a path forward that did not involve just scraping by but actually thriving. By spring of 1879, she had paid off the last of her father's debts. The day she made the final payment, she came home and just stood in the middle of the small house, feeling the weight lift from her shoulders. Reed found her there, and without a word he pulled her into his arms and held her while she cried with relief. "You did it," he said into her hair. "You carried it all and you made it through." "We did it," she corrected. "I could not have done it without you." That night, after her brothers had gone to bed, Olivia and Reed sat outside under the vast sweep of stars that filled the desert sky. She leaned against him, his arm around her shoulders, and felt a contentment she had not known was possible. "What now?" Reed asked. "Now that the debts are cleared, what is next?" "I have been thinking about that," Olivia said. "I want to expand the business like you suggested. Not just freight but passenger service, maybe even mail contracts. I want to build something bigger than just survival." "That sounds good. And I want you to be my partner, not just an employee but an equal partner in the business. You have earned it and I trust you." Reed was quiet for a long moment. "Olivia, are you sure? That is a big step. I am sure. I know what you are worth and I know that I want to build this with you." She turned to look at him. "But there is something else I want too." "What is that?" "I want to build a life with you. Not just a business partnership but a real partnership. Marriage if you want it. A future together." Reed's face showed surprise, then joy, then something deeper and more lasting. "Are you proposing to me?" "I suppose I am. Is that a problem?" He laughed, the sound full of happiness. "No, it is not a problem at all. Yes, Olivia Owens, I will marry you. I cannot think of anything I want more." He kissed her then, and it was not their first kiss, but it felt like a beginning, the start of something new and frightening and wonderful. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling. They were married in June of 1879 in a simple ceremony in Bishop. Oscar and Otis stood as witnesses, along with Daniel and a few of the merchants who had become friends over the past year. There was no fancy dress or elaborate celebration, just 2 people making promises they intended to keep. Olivia wore her best dress, plain blue cotton that she had sewn herself, and Reed wore his cleanest shirt and a new bandana he had bought for the occasion. After the ceremony, they went back to work, because freight did not stop for weddings. But that night, in the home that was now truly theirs, they lay together and talked about the future they would build. Reed spoke of his dream of a horse ranch, and Olivia suggested they could combine it with the freight business, breeding horses for hauling and riding. They could buy land in the valley, somewhere with good water and grass, and build something that would last for generations. It was not just dreams, though. Over the following years, they made those dreams real. The freight business grew into a passenger and mail service, with regular routes throughout the Owens Valley and beyond. They bought land north of Bishop, good grazing land with a creek running through it, and built a house big enough for a family. They started breeding horses, focusing on sturdy animals that could handle mountain trails and desert heat. Olivia gave birth to their first child in the spring of 1881, a boy they named Robert after Reed's middle name. He was a healthy baby with his father's blue eyes and his mother's determined chin, and he filled their home with noise and joy. Oscar and Otis doted on their nephew, and Olivia marveled at how her life had transformed from desperate survival to abundant happiness. Reed proved to be a wonderful father, patient and playful and protective. He took Robert everywhere once the boy was old enough to ride, teaching him about horses and land and the value of honest work. And with Olivia, he remained the steady, caring partner he had always been, sharing not just the work but the decisions and the dreams. Their second child came 2 years later, a girl they named Rachel. She had her mother's auburn hair and a fierce independence that showed itself early. By the time she could walk, she was following her father around the ranch, insisting on helping with everything. Reed and Olivia watched their children grow and felt the satisfaction of seeing their hard work bear fruit in multiple ways. The business continued to thrive. By 1885, they had 6 wagons running regular routes, with a dozen employees working for them. They had contracts with mining companies, ranches, and the territorial government. The passenger service had become particularly successful, known for its reliability and safety. People throughout the Owens Valley knew that if you needed something hauled or someone transported, Owens and Finch freight and passenger service would get it done. Oscar grew into a capable young man and took over much of the day-to-day management of the freight operation, showing a head for business that made his sister proud. Otis decided he wanted to study law and went to San Francisco for his education, promising to return and help protect the family business from legal troubles. Both brothers thrived, and Olivia knew that her father would have been proud of what they had all built together. Through it all, Reed and Olivia remained partners in every sense of the word. They still took routes together sometimes, leaving the children with Oscar or a trusted neighbor, just to recapture those early days when it was the two of them against the world. They would drive through the valley with the mountains rising on either side, talking about everything and nothing, still finding new things to learn about each other. One evening in the late summer of 1887, they sat on the porch of their ranch house watching the sun set over the Sierra Nevada. Their children were playing in the yard, Robert teaching Rachel how to skip stones in the creek. The horses grazed in the pasture, and the freight wagon sat in the barn, ready for tomorrow's work. You ever think about how different things could have been? Reed asked, his arm around Olivia's shoulders in the familiar way that had become as natural as breathing. How do you mean? If that crowd had decided to hang me that day in Independence, if you had not stepped forward and lied to save me, my whole life would have ended before it really began. Olivia leaned against him. I think about it sometimes, how one moment can change everything, how choosing to help a stranger can lead to all of this. Do you regret anything? Not one thing. Every hard mile, every heavy load, every moment I thought I could not carry anymore, it all led here. To you, to our children, to this life. She turned to look at him. You lightened my load, Reed, not because you thought I could not carry it, but because you wanted to carry it with me. That made all the difference. He kissed her forehead. You saved my life twice. Once from that mob, and once from a future of just drifting from job to job with no real purpose. You gave me a reason to stay, a reason to build something lasting. They sat in comfortable silence, watching their children play as the sky turned from gold to purple to deep blue. Robert caught a stone just right, and it skipped 5 times across the water, and Rachel shrieked with delight and demanded he teach her how to do it. The sound of their laughter carried across the ranch, a sound that represented everything Reed and Olivia had worked for. The years continued to pass, bringing new challenges and new joys. They weathered droughts and economic downturns, birth and death, and all the complications of running a business and raising a family. But they weathered it together. Two people who had learned that strength was not just about how much you could carry alone, but about having someone who chose to carry it with you. By 1890, Robert was 9 years old and already showing an aptitude for working with horses that delighted his father. Rachel was 7 and every bit as fierce as her mother, declaring that she was going to run the biggest freight company in California when she grew up. Olivia and Reed listened to their children's dreams and made plans to support them, whatever paths they chose. The freight and passenger business had expanded beyond the Owens Valley, with routes reaching to Carson City in the north and as far south as Mojave. They employed over 30 people and had a reputation throughout the region for honesty and reliability. The horse breeding operation had also become successful, with buyers coming from all over California and Nevada to purchase their animals. Oscar had married a schoolteacher from Bishop, a smart woman named Margaret who kept the books for the business with meticulous precision. They lived in town and had 2 children of their own, expanding the family that Olivia had worked so hard to keep together. Otis had returned from San Francisco with his law degree and opened a practice in Independence, handling legal matters not just for the family business but for the whole community. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Reed surprised Olivia by taking her on a trip, just the 2 of them, retracing the route they had taken on that first journey together from Independence to Bishop. They drove a wagon pulled by 2 of the horses they had bred themselves, taking their time and stopping at places that had become significant in their shared history. "Remember when we stopped here for lunch that first day?" Reed asked, pulling the wagon to a halt at a spot where a stand of cottonwoods provided shade. "You told me about your father and your brothers, and I thought you were the strongest person I had ever met. I thought you were either very brave or very foolish to take a job from someone you had just met," Olivia replied, climbing down from the wagon. "I am still not sure which it was. Maybe both." He spread a blanket on the ground and they sat together, eating the lunch they had packed. The valley spread before them, golden grass and distant mountains and the endless blue sky. "I fell in love with you that day, I think, or started to. Watching you drive that wagon, so determined and capable, I wanted to be part of what you were building. I was so scared," Olivia admitted. "Not of the work, but of letting someone in. I had gotten used to doing everything myself, to not relying on anyone. You scared me because you made me want to rely on you. And now I cannot imagine doing any of this without you. You became the foundation I did not know I needed." They made love under the cottonwoods, the midday heat making their skin slick with sweat, moving together with the ease of long familiarity and the passion that had not dimmed with time. Afterward, they lay together on the blanket and talked about their children, their business, their future. They made plans to expand the ranch, to add more breeding stock, to perhaps start a stagecoach line to supplement the freight wagons. That evening, as they continued their journey toward Bishop, Olivia felt a profound sense of gratitude for the life they had built. She thought about that moment 10 years ago when she had stumbled into Independence with her overloaded mules and her desperate determination. She had been so focused on surviving, on keeping her family together, that she had not let herself imagine happiness. And then Reed had appeared, or rather, she had rescued him, and in saving him she had somehow saved herself. When they reached Bishop, they found Oscar and Margaret had organized a celebration at the ranch. Friends and family gathered to toast their anniversary, and Olivia looked around at all these people whose lives were connected to theirs in various ways. Employees who had become friends, neighbors who had become family, children who represented not just their own future, but the continuation of everything she and Reed had built together. Late in the evening, after most of the guests had left and the children were asleep, Oscar pulled his sister aside. "I am proud of you," he said simply, "for everything you did for me, and Otis for everything you built, for the life you made. Father would be proud too." Olivia felt tears prick her eyes. "I hope so. I tried to honor what he taught me while making it something more. You did. You took what he started and made it better, stronger, and you did it without losing yourself or sacrificing the people you love. Oscar hugged her. That takes a rare kind of strength. The years rolled on, each one bringing its own stories. In 1893, Olivia gave birth to their third child, another boy they named Raymond. He was a surprise, arriving when Olivia was 36 and they had thought their family was complete. But he was a welcome surprise, a joyful addition who kept them young with his energy and mischief. Robert grew into a skilled horseman and began traveling to other ranches to help with difficult animals, building his own reputation. Rachel started working in the business, first helping with paperwork and scheduling, then eventually taking over some of the routes. She had her mother's determination and her father's easy way with people, and it became clear she would indeed run the freight operation someday. Reed and Olivia settled into the rhythms of middle age, their bodies showing the wear of decades of physical work but their spirits still strong. They still worked, though they delegated more now, trusting the people they had trained and hired. They spent more time with their children, teaching them not just the practical skills of running a business but the values that had guided them. Honesty, hard work, loyalty, and the understanding that strength came not from bearing burdens alone but from choosing to share them with others. One winter evening in 1898, as snow fell gently outside and a fire crackled in the hearth, the whole family gathered at the ranch house for Christmas. Robert was 17 now, already a man in most ways. Rachel was 15, sharp-minded and ambitious. Raymond was 5, running around with his young cousins in that endless energy of childhood. Oscar and Margaret were there with their children, now 4 in total. Otis had come from Independence with his wife Elizabeth and their 2 boys. Olivia stood in the doorway watching everyone, and Reed came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "I am thinking about how full this house is, how full my life is. 20 years ago, I was alone except for 2 boys who needed raising, drowning in debt, wondering if I could make it through another day. And now look." She gestured at the crowded room. All of this came from choosing to keep going, from refusing to give up even when it seemed impossible. "And from taking a chance on a cowboy who was about to get hanged," Reed added with a smile in his voice. "That too." She turned in his arms to face him. "Best decision I ever made." "Second best," he corrected. "The best was deciding to carry all that weight in the first place. Everything else came from that choice, from your strength and your determination." "Our strength," she said. "I could carry the weight alone, but I did not have to once I found you. That is the difference between surviving and living. I was surviving before. With you, I got to actually live." They kissed, surrounded by their family and the life they had built together, the snow falling soft outside and the fire keeping them warm within. It was not a fairy tale ending because it was not an ending at all, just another moment in a life full of moments, each one precious and hard-won. The new century came, bringing automobiles and telephones and all manner of changes to the world. The freight business adapted, eventually incorporating motorized vehicles while still maintaining the horse-drawn wagons for routes where roads were poor. The ranch continued to thrive, known throughout California for its quality horses. Reed and Olivia grew old together, their hair turning gray and their bodies slowing, but their partnership remaining strong. They took walks around the ranch in the evenings, holding hands and talking about their day, still finding new things to discuss after decades together. They played with their grandchildren, passing on stories and lessons. They sat on the porch and watched the sun set over the same mountains they had crossed countless times in their working years. In 1910, on a warm spring evening much like the one when they had first admitted their feelings for each other, Reed and Olivia celebrated their 31st wedding anniversary. Their children had organized another gathering, but this one was smaller, more intimate, just immediate family. Robert was now 29, married with children of his own, running a successful horse training operation in partnership with his father. Rachel was 27, managing the freight business with skill and innovation, expanding into new territories and new types of service. Raymond was 17, still figuring out his path but showing an interest in his Uncle Otis's law practice. After dinner, Reed and Olivia excused themselves and walked down to the creek where their grandchildren loved to play. The evening was soft and golden, the air smelling of sage and cottonwood blossoms. They sat on the bank, their fingers intertwined, and watched the water flow past. "You remember what you said to me that day we met?" Reed asked. "After you saved me from that mob." "I said a lot of things that day. You said I better not make you regret lying for me, or you would make sure I regretted it more," Olivia laughed. "I was trying to sound tough. You were tough. You still are." He brought her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles. "But my point is, do you regret it? Any of it?" She looked at him. This man who had been her partner through everything, who had chosen to lighten her load not because he thought she was weak, but because he loved her. His face was lined now, weathered by decades of sun and wind, but his blue eyes were still the same, still looking at her with that combination of admiration and affection that had never wavered. "Not for one single moment," she said. "You were the best thing that ever happened to me, Reed Finch. The best choice I ever made. I love you, Olivia. I have loved you for 31 years, and I will love you until I take my last breath and probably beyond that. I love you too, more than words can say." They sat by the creek until the stars came out, talking and remembering and planning, because even in their 60s there were still plans to make and dreams to dream. Their life together had not been easy, but it had been real and rich and deeply meaningful. They had faced hardships and celebrated triumphs. They had built something lasting, not just in business terms but in the family they had created and the love they had nurtured. As they walked back to the house, moving slower now but still moving together, Olivia thought about that young woman who had walked into independence with more weight than anyone should have to carry. She had been so determined to prove she could do it alone, so focused on survival that she had almost missed the opportunity for something more. But she had taken a chance on a cowboy who needed saving, and in the process had discovered that true strength was not about how much you could carry by yourself. It was about building a partnership with someone who saw your strength and honored it, who offered to share your burdens not because they thought you could not manage, but because they wanted to walk beside you. It was about choosing each day to keep building, keep loving, keep moving forward together. The cowboy had indeed lightened her load, but not by taking it from her. Instead, he had picked up his own share and walked alongside her, mile after mile, year after year, until the weight that had once threatened to crush her had become manageable, even light. Together they had carried it all, through the wild and beautiful landscape of the American West, through hardship and triumph, through the building of a life that neither could have created alone. And in the end, that was the greatest gift of all. Not the success of their business or the land they had acquired or even the family they had raised, but the simple and profound knowledge that they had chosen each other, day after day, and that choice had made all the difference. They reached the house where their children and grandchildren waited, the windows glowing warm in the gathering darkness. Reed held the door for Olivia, and they walked inside together, ready for whatever the evening and the years ahead might bring, secure in the partnership they had forged, and the love that had sustained them through everything. The woman who could carry more than her weight had found the cowboy who chose to lighten her load anyway, and together they had built something that would last long after they were gone. A legacy of strength, partnership, and enduring love that would echo through generations in the wild and beautiful Owens Valley of California.